All right, listeners, ready to dive deep? You guys sent in some awesome research on white blood cells, and well, I got to say, this stuff is right up my alley.
Yeah, they really are fascinating little warriors, aren't they?
You got that right. So let's jump right in. What we call this episode again? White blood cell warriors. I like it.
Microscopic defenders was another suggestion.
Oh, yeah, that's good too. Either way, I'm pumped to explore this stuff. So before we meet the actual cells themselves, maybe a quick overview of the immune system would be helpful, right? Just to set the stage.
Definitely. So think of your immune system like your body's own personal army, right? It's this incredible network of cells, tissues, and organs all working together to protect you from anything that could cause harm.
Okay, that makes sense. And the harm we're talking about are things like bacteria, viruses, parasites, right? That kind of stuff.
Exactly. All those nasty invaders, plus even things like your own cells that have gone rogue and could potentially turn cancerous.
Wow, so it's like a constant battle going on inside of us?
You could say that. It's pretty remarkable when you think about it.
So where do white blood cells fit into all of this? What's their role in this epic battle?
The white blood cells, also known as leukocytes. These guys are the frontline soldiers. They're constantly patrolling your bloodstream and tissues looking for anything suspicious.
Interesting. So I was looking at the research here, and it says that white blood cells make up less than 1% of our blood volume. That seems kind of small considering how important they are.
Right. It is pretty wild to think about that. But what they lack in size, they more than make up for in power and versatility.
So it's quality over quantity then.
Exactly. And one of the coolest things about them is how they can actually distinguish between your own cells, the good guys, and foreign invaders, the bad guys.
Wow, how do they do that? It's like they have some kind of built-in radar or something?
Well, it is kind of like a radar system, actually. They have these special receptors on their surface that allow them to recognize specific molecules that are found on pathogens. These molecules are called antigens, and they act like red flags, basically signaling to the white blood cells that something isn't right.
That's incredible. So once they've identified a threat, how do they actually get to it? I mean, our bodies are pretty vast landscapes for these tiny cells to navigate.
Well, they have a few impressive tricks up their sleeves. One is called chemotaxis, where they follow chemical trails to pinpoint the exact location of an infection.
So they're like little bloodhounds sniffing out a scent?
That's a great way to put it. And then once they reach the scene, they use this process called diapedesis, where they can actually change their shape and squeeze through tiny gaps in blood vessel walls to reach the infected tissue.
Whoa, so they're like cellular contortionists too?
Haha, yeah, something like that. They're pretty remarkable little cells.
So tell me more about these different types of white blood cells. You mentioned there are a few.
Yeah, we can break them down into two main groups, granulocytes and agranulocytes.
Okay, those names sound pretty intimidating.
They do sound a little technical, but it's actually pretty simple. Granulocytes have these tiny granules inside of them, which are basically little sacs filled with enzymes and other chemicals that they use to fight off invaders.
So they're like little walking weapons factories.
Haha, pretty much. And then granulocytes don't have those granules. They have different ways of fighting off infection.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. So let's dive into the granulocytes first. Tell me, who are the heavy hitters in this group?
All right, well, first up, we've got the neutrophils. These guys are like the first responders of the immune system. Whenever there's an injury or infection, they're the first ones on the scene.
So they're like the EMTs of the body, always ready for action.
Exactly, and they're super effective, too. They can engulf and destroy bacteria like nobody's business.
I read that neutrophils have this really distinctive multi-lobed nucleus. What's that all about?
Yeah, it's pretty cool, actually. It gives them their other nickname, polymorphs, which means many forms. Basically, their nucleus can take on all these different shapes, which helps them to squeeze through those tiny gaps in the blood vessels we were talking about earlier.
So it's like they're designed to be super agile and get to where they need to go.
Exactly. And you know that pus you sometimes see in a wound? Well, that's largely made up of dead neutrophils. They die in the line of duty after they've finished fighting off the infection.
Wow, so even something we might think of as gross is actually a sign of our immune system working hard to protect us.
Exactly, and that brings us to our next type of granulocyte, the eosinophils. These guys are specialists in fighting off parasites.
Parasites, like worms and stuff.
Yep, exactly. And they also play a role in allergic reactions.
Oh, interesting. So how do they actually fight off these parasites?
Well, they contain these granules that stain bright red under a microscope, and these granules are filled with enzymes and toxins that are specifically designed to kill parasites.
Wow, so they're like little walking poison darts.
Haha, that's one way to put it. And then last but not least, we have the basophils.
Okay, what's their specialty?
Basophils are kind of like the alarm system of the immune system. They release histamine, which is a chemical that triggers inflammation.
Inflammation. Isn't that a bad thing?
Well, it can be, but it's also a necessary part of the immune response. Inflammation helps to bring more blood flow to the area of an infection or injury, which helps to bring in more white blood cells and other healing factors.
Okay, so it's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah, exactly. And basophil will also play a role in allergic reactions. They're the ones that release histamine when you come into contact with something you're allergic to.
Ah, so they're the ones to blame for my itchy eyes and runny nose.
Well, you can't really blame them. They're just trying to protect you.
I know, I know. So we've covered the granulocytes. What about the other group, the agranulocytes?
Right, so the granulocytes include lymphocytes and monocytes.
Okay, tell me about lymphocytes first.
So lymphocytes are like the special forces of the immune system. They're highly trained and specialized in fighting off specific threats.
Interesting. So are there different types of lymphocytes?
Yeah, there are two main types, T cells and B cells.
Okay, what's the difference between them?
Well, T cells are like the hand-to-hand combat specialists. They directly attack and destroy infected cells.
Wow, so they're like the assassins of the immune system.
Haha, yeah, something like that. And there are different types of T cells, too. Some are helper T cells, which help to coordinate the immune response. And then there are cytotoxic T cells, which are the ones that actually do the killing.
So it's like a whole military operation going on in there.
It really is. And then we have the B cells.
What do they do?
B cells are the ones that produce antibodies.
Antibodies? Remind me what those are again.
So antibodies are these Y-shaped proteins that can bind to specific antigens on the surface of pathogens.
Right, I remember those from before. So basically, antibodies are like little tags that mark the pathogens for destruction.
Exactly. They can also neutralize the pathogens directly by preventing them from binding to your cells.
Wow, so they're like little guided missiles seeking out and destroying the enemy.
Aha, that's a great analogy. And then finally, we have the monocytes.
Okay, what's their role in all of this?
Monocytes are the cleanup crew. They're big cells that engulf and destroy pathogens and cellular debris.
So they're like the garbage collectors of the immune system.
Yeah, exactly. And they also play a role in presenting antigens to the T cells, which helps to trigger a more targeted immune response.
So it's like they're the intelligence gatherers, too.
You could say that. They're pretty versatile cells.
So we've got all these different types of white blood cells working together to keep us healthy. But what happens when things go wrong? You mentioned earlier that there can be problems with having too many or too few white blood cells.
Right. So having too many white blood cells is called leukocytosis, and having too few is called leukopenia.
Okay, so what causes leukocytosis?
Leukocytosis can be caused by a number of things, including infection, inflammation, and even certain types of cancer.
Cancer. That sounds serious.
It can be one example is leukemia, which is a cancer of the white blood cells.
Wow, so the very cells that are supposed to be protecting us can sometimes turn against us.
Yeah, unfortunately that can happen. And then on the other hand, leukopenia can be caused by things like viral infections, autoimmune diseases, and certain medications.
So both leukocytosis and leukopenia can be signs of something serious going on in the body.
Exactly. That's why it's important to get regular blood tests so your doctor can monitor your white blood cell count and make sure everything is within a healthy range.
This has been an absolutely fascinating deep dive. I'm amazed by the complexity and efficiency of the immune system. It's like a perfectly choreographed dance with all these different cells playing their part.
It really is. And it's something we often take for granted until we get sick.
That's true. So, dear listener, knowing what you know now about these amazing cells, I have a question for you. How do you think lifestyle choices, things like diet, exercise, and stress levels, might impact your own white blood cell army? It's definitely something to ponder, and we encourage you to keep exploring this incredible world within your own body.
Absolutely. There's always more to learn, and who knows what amazing discoveries are still waiting to be made.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.